Canada. This video is dedicated to you, because a lot of you watch my channel and I've never really talked about Canada in a video before. Now I'm addressing you in English, although quite a number of you aren't actually born speaking English as your first language. And this is because of a certain European nation that got involved in the early modern period. They have a red, white and blue flag, they're famous for their cheese, and their incredibly romantic capital city. Now of course, you know who I'm talking about. Wait, that's wrong. It's not the Dutch. Hold on.
History with Hilbert.
Histoire avec Hilbert.
Anyway, the take-home message here is that it was not in fact the Dutch, but rather the French. And there are actually 7.2 million people who speak French as a first language in Canada today, which is 20.6% of the country's entire population. But how did this come about? Why are there so many first language French speakers in Canada? Well, of course, before the French arrived, people were speaking very different languages. And these languages were spoken by the First Nations people. Of course, there are very many different groupings of Native American peoples. In the south, you have, and in the west, actually, you have the Nadene people, and very interestingly, is that they also are related to groups in the far south of the United States today, and some along the Pacific coast. In the far north, you have Inuit group, whereas further to the east, you also had Huron groups, the Wyandot people, Algonquin groups, lots of different groupings there. And actually, while I won't be talking about them very much today, I do very much plan on talking about them in the future. And I also want to bring, these by the way are my little bots for the Inuit peoples further to the north. I do actually want to bring your attention to the fact that you can learn a lot more about the native peoples in America, and this is something that I've been doing. If you are, then you should do what I did and head over to Audible, who are sponsoring this video. Now Audible are the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks. And actually, if you head over to Audible, then I have a special offer which I'll mention in just a second. Now every month members can pick any title, and as well as 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and you also get access to daily news and guided meditation programs. Now I've recently really been enjoying America Before, which is Graham Hancock's work on America before European colonization. I listen to it because often I'm alone with my own thoughts, which isn't the best, so I really like to whack on an audiobook in the background that I can just listen to. If you go to www.audible.com/historywithhilbert, it's on the screen there, or you can text History with Hilbert to 500 500, then you can start listening with an exclusive 30-day free trial, which means 1 free audiobook of your choice and 2 Audible originals as well. And the great thing is that even if you cancel, then you still have these. These are yours forever, so you can get them completely free. Now, big thank you to Audible for sponsoring this, and I'll get back to the story of French in Canada now. Now, the year 1534 is an important year for Canadian history because this is the year in which the French explorer Jacques Cartier started his first mission into the area that's now Canada, heading from around the area of Newfoundland and then into the Gulf of the Bay of Lawrence, that kind of area. Now, what's interesting about Jacques Cartier is actually that he wasn't born in France, because he was born in 1491, in the last year that Brittany was still an independent duchy. And now this is a really weird link back to a really old video of mine from 2017, which was about the Breton crisis, because I covered quite a bit of Tudor history. So if you want to know about the Breton crisis and the state of affairs in Brittany when he was, a child, when he was born, then you can click on the link and you can hear sort of fairly kind of close to voice drop aged Hilbert, which is quite interesting to hear, but you can do that if you so choose. But anyhow, that's an important date, but more Canadians will know the date of 1608, and this is because of another French explorer, Samuel de Champlain, And this is the year in which he founded the first site on what's now Quebec. So a very important date for the French there. Now, he did actually already found another place, Victoria, Port Victoria, in 1605, but of course 1608, the foundation of Quebec is seen as being more significant and important, and both of these were founded along the Lawrence River so that they could trade with the native tribes there, because fur was an incredibly luxury resource that was very much sought after in Europe, and so the French were there so they could trade with the natives and then bring the pelts back to Europe and hopefully make their fortune in that way. But I hear you say, if they were just traders, then how did they leave such a lasting linguistic legacy that you have over 20% of Canada's population speaking French? Because of course the Dutch did something similar in the area of New Amsterdam, which is now New York, but Dutch is no longer spoken there. Well, unfortunately for them, the British came, and in much larger numbers than the Dutch and the French at this time. So you had Englishmen coming over, Irishmen, Welshmen, Scots, and you get a really great mixture there. And they were coming over in large numbers, and so their population greatly outnumbered that of the French. And this is why the French came up with a strategy, and they invited over several hundred women from France, mostly young women between 16 and 25, who were called les Filles du Roi. And this means the daughters of the king, the king's daughters. And essentially, these were young single women, lots of them from Paris and other areas, as I'll talk about in just a minute, who were brought over as wives for the mostly male population of the traders in New France. Now, the reason for this was to boost the numbers, and actually they really did this very successfully, because from 1663 to 1672, the population of New France doubled, and then more than doubled in the years afterwards as well, which is exactly what they were hoping for. Now, a lot of these girls actually came from the area of Normandy. And if you've been watching my channel recently, you might have seen my video on the Norman French language. And actually quite a lot of Norman French influence has entered the modern language or dialect that's spoken in the area of Canada, the French language spoken there, especially the dialect of Joual, which is seen as quite a working class dialect, especially in certain urban areas, has a lot of Normanization in it, which is very interesting. Now, to return to the history, in 1685 we also get another wave of emigrants coming from France. This is because of the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, which had promised tolerance of Protestants in France, because there's a huge wars that were fought in the 16th century, and now in the 17th century it was revoked, so lots of Protestants fled to South Africa as well, for example, and these were called the Huguenots, and many of them also came to France. Now, in 1713, the War of the Spanish Succession ended, and this was a war that was fought between the Dutch and the English, the British, against the French and the Spanish and others. And so this came to an end with the Treaty of Utrecht, Utrecht being in the Netherlands, that actually is in the Netherlands and has to do with the Dutch. But after this, the English, I need to say the British at this point really, because you've got the official union already going on from 1707 in Britain. But anyhow, the British, they turn their attention to the North American theatre, and they start to make inroads into native territory, many of the native tribes being allied to the French. But in 1756, they actually start fighting physically with the French, specifically in the area of New France in Canada. And this is known in Europe and the rest of the world as the 7 Years' War, although specifically the North American theatre is known as the French and Indian War. And this essentially pit the British and their native allies, specifically the Iroquois Confederacy, against the French and their native allies. For example, the Huron or Wyandot Confederacy, and many other groups as well there. Now, of course, for Americans, this is important because Big G Washington was involved on the British side there, and afterwards the high taxation that was imposed on the population is one of the reasons for the American Revolution occurring. But for Canada, it's very important because in 1759, the British gained the other hand, and at the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, they defeated the French army and managed to capture the city of Quebec, after which time Canada became British and remained British. Now, after this time, they really did try to force the population that was, of course, from France, French-speaking, to start speaking English, and they changed the legal language to English and tried to repress the Catholic faith, which was very much tied to the French as well. But this only lasted a little while, and in 1774, with the Quebec Act, they actually revoked many of these intolerant measures. So they lifted the ban on French in courts and things like this, so the official language of the courts was returned to French in the area of Quebec, as well as some of the intolerance towards Catholics. But you can clearly still see the French influence in Quebec. For example, on the flag, they clearly have the four fleurs-de-lis, and as I explained in another video, which is about the French flag, you can also see that the base design of the flag of Quebec is actually based on the military standards that were used by French regiments in the Royal French Army. And that essentially is why Canada also has a French history. Alright everyone, so I hope you found this video interesting. I just thought it was an interesting topic about why there was French being spoken in Canada, and I also felt like I really had to make a video about Canada at some point because I have so many Canadians watching me, which is really awesome. I really appreciate your support. So let me know what you thought about this in the comments below. Do give Audible a try, actually. I really like listening to audiobooks. I often listen when I'm walking around as well, and when I'm in my room doing a bit of work that doesn't really require too much thinking, like the laundry, for example. So I'd really give it a go, and especially because it's free. I'm Dutch, so I love free things, so, you know, just give it a try. But let me know if this is a topic you're interested in. If you want more on Native American history as well, I'd really like to get into that, and actually I have some things planned, or more sort of later Canadian history as well. Please do let me know. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. I have been Hilbert, and this has been The History.